Hi, hello everyone. Thanks guys for joining us for this new Dr. Jaspersoft session. We'll be talking about showcasing JasperReports Server deployment with Kubernetes. We've already had some sessions before when we showed a new way of doing Docker and Kubernetes with JasperReports Server. We already did a quick demo on Docker, and this part will be more focused on Kubernetes. I'm Badr Draifi, your Dr. Jaspersoft co-host, Customer Success Architect, and we have here with us today our presenter, Gaurav Vermani, Customer Success Architect. He will be our guest speaker, presenting and demoing an actual implementation of Kubernetes with JasperReports Server. Are you here with us, Gaurav?
Yep, I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Hi. Great. We have also Kamal Kumlin, my co-host, Dr. Jaspersoft. He's also joining us here to help on answering questions. And yeah, let's go to the next slide. We're talking about the next Dr. Jaspersoft session here will soon to be published, and we will soon get emails for registrations and reminders and all of that. We don't know exactly the topic of it, but we will update you soon about that. So stay tuned. And just before giving the floor to Gaurav, just please, guys, don't forget to put your questions on the comments section in the right of the YouTube stream. We will be monitoring it, and we'll try to get to all of your questions at the end of the session and also during the end of session. So yeah, just stay on the comment section. We are all monitoring that. Without further ado, Gaurav, you can go ahead.
All right, Badr, let me share my screen here.
Yeah, sure. Let me stop sharing.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, so let's get started here with the step-by-step deployment of JasperReports Server to the Kubernetes cluster. All right, so first of all, I want to show you guys where is all the documentation and all the resources that are available for you to go and refer to for this installation. So if you go to the GitHub repository for TIBCO software, you will see the main root directory. It's JS Docker. And within that, we have Jaspersoft containers. And once you go inside, you will see basically different entry points to the different containerizations that are available. So you will see one for Docker, and this one is the one for Kubernetes that I'll be covering today. And we also have the documentation and release for OpenShift. All right, so when I go inside Kubernetes, you will see there is a JRS, and then there is also a separate folder for scalable query engine. So if you go inside JRS, you will see the main document. That's the README file that opens up, and it has all the steps along with all the parameters, all the different things that you will need to configure to be able to successfully deploy Jaspersoft Server on a Kubernetes cluster. So generally, it makes it easier if you have a Linux system and your servers are also Linux-based. But for this use case, I'm running a Windows Server machine. So as you can already see, I am using a Linux emulator. It's called a WinSCP. This is the black window I have here. And I'll be running all the commands, the Linux commands onto this emulator. And what it does is it will convert them into Windows format in the backend, and it will process them as if it's a Linux system. So looking at the documentation, you can see talks about adding repositories, and then there are steps for the configuration, JMS configuration, ingress controllers, setup for monitoring, logging, steps to follow if the repository database does not exist. If it already exists, how do you verify the installation, EKS on the AWS, setting up the load balancer, and then integrating this scalable query engine with the server. And then around the bottom of this page, you will see documentation which talks about a specific use case, and it says deploying TIBCO JasperReports Server using PostgreSQL container in the Kubernetes cluster. So these are the steps that we will be following, and you guys can follow on your end as well if you have these open. And so, as you can see, the very first step is to clone this repository. So for my sake, just for some organization, I'm going to go ahead and create a new directory where I'm going to do all this work. So that way it's a separate folder and I have all my resources and everything that I need over there. All right, so.
Hey, Gaurav, sorry to interrupt.
Yes, come on.
I was just going to ask, so this is your target release is 8.10, right? I don't know if you mentioned that.
That
okay.
is correct. So 8.10 is our latest version that's available. And if you go on to edelivery.tibco.com, that is the latest version we have available as of date. And I will be using that for the installation. And I'll be going through the steps for installing the 8.1. So all through the configuration, it requires a version as to which version of JRS do you want to install. So all throughout, you will see me referring to 8.1.0, and that's the version I'll be using here.
Thanks. No, I just mentioned that because in case people watch this recorded later and maybe next year, let's say there's a new version, just to make sure that they know what the target version is, and the GitHub repository as well has I wanted to mention has basically tags. So if you basically change the tag instead of the main, which is currently selected, then you can choose the specific version that you want to target. Just want to mention that.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yep, sure. All right, so let's make a new directory in the C drive. Okay, I'm going to cd into that directory. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to clone our existing GitHub repository, which has all the resources for Docker and Kubernetes. So here's the command for that. Okay, so I have this file system open here, so I can show you guys in parallel what's going on. So this is the directory we created, and this is our Git that we replicated and we brought it into this directory. Okay, so once we have that, if you notice, there are a few things that are prerequisites that we need to be able to do this installation. Obviously, you need to have some knowledge of Docker and Kubernetes. And on top of that, you will also need to have installation of Docker and also the kubectl. For my use case, I am using what's called a Docker desktop. And this is how it looks like. So Docker desktop is basically a GUI over the Docker software. So it gives you a nice view of what everything is, what is running on your local, and so on. So this is all your images show up for the Docker desktop, and then any persistent volumes are going to show up there. And then one thing to keep in mind is when you install Docker desktop, Kubernetes is not enabled by default. So you need to go into settings, and then on the left side, you will see an option for Kubernetes. And then you want to put a check mark here. And then when you do apply and restart, it's going to enable the Kubernetes cluster to be able to run within the Docker desktop. So that is it. That's the only setting you will need to do in Docker desktop. And having a visual view of what everything is and if it's running or not, it makes life way easier. So highly recommended going the Docker desktop way. All right, so I already have the kubectl installed on this machine, and Docker desktop I already just showed you. So I can actually go right in. Let me cd into JS. Okay, and now I'm going to copy the installer, the binzip file for the Jasper Report server, and that's the version 8.1. I already saved it from e-delivery site onto a local folder, and I am now going to copy it to this directory. All right. So as you can see, this is the copy that I brought over from my source directory, and we have the binzip file. So next, I will need to run an unzip script to unzip this and explode it into a regular directory. So before I do that, I will have to do a change mod onto the scripts that are available in this GitHub repository package. And so let me go to the scripts folder, and I'll be running this script and doing the chmod on that before.
So just a quick question
Yes.
here, Gaurav. So you, when you downloaded the 8.1 version, this is because it's the latest version that we have in Git repository. But if our users want to use another version, like let's say 8.0 or 7.9, they can change it in the environment variables, or there's some properties file, and we can change our.
Yep. So right now, the image that we have in GitHub, it's pointing to the latest version that we have out. It's the version 8.1. But yeah, if users would like to change, let's say they want to use version 8.0.0 or 7.9, they can always use that binzip, and then they'll be able to change the environment variable to point to that version. And the same scripts, everything that I'm showing you would still work for that.
Okay, but they can't just put the zip of the 7.9 or 8 and with a different version in the environment variable. They both should be aligned.
They both should be aligned. That is correct. Otherwise, it's going to error out.
Thank you.
And just to clarify on that, Butter, the easiest way, I think, to avoid any errors is to download or clone the correct repository or the correct branch, right? So if you if you go with the main, it's going to be always the latest. So let's say next year we have 8.2, and you get the main, you're going to get 8.2, right? So if you want to get a specific version that matches your target version, let's say 8.0.2, then you go to the repository, you clone that branch directly, and then in theory, all the versions should already be set up correctly in the properties files. And that's, I think, an easier way and also less error prone.
Yep. So that would be also one of the other ways of doing it. Yep. So if you want to just go to that versions tag, so in the same repository, like we are in the main tag right now, but if you go inside tags, you would see a tag for each of the versions that are available. And you could essentially pick up the old tag and run it that route. That way you wouldn't have to change any of the variables. The only downside in that approach would be that you will not have the latest and greatest code. But still, the code for a particular tag will help you to just grab that and run with it without having to change anything.
True, yeah, but sometimes it's also a matter of the latest, the newest might not work with with an older version, right? So that one that you choose is going to be already tested with that
specific for that. Yep, I agree. Okay, so we are in the script folders right now, and then I am going to go ahead and run two commands. So in the first command, I am changing the permissions on this shell script, and then on the second command, I'm just running it.
So Gara, I believe that's probably to do with the line endings, Windows line endings in the file.
Correct.
So, there's the command called DOS to Unix that you can run on the file to convert. That's probably due to, I don't know if it's installed in your Cygwin, but
yeah, let's try, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, apparently I do have that.
Okay,
So
that's good.
now let's run this again.
Yeah, it seems to be working now. I think this is to do with there are some Git settings that will determine if the text files are converted, depending on if you're in Windows or Unix or Linux machine. So we can, I guess, double check later on the Git settings, but it's just something that people need to be aware of to make sure that their Git settings are correct.
Correct. And again, we face this error because again, this is a Windows machine, and I am running an emulator to be emulating the Linux commands through this WinSCP. So if you have a Linux machine, Linux server where running these, you may not receive these errors that we just received. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so this is done. Next, I am going to look into changing some of the properties. Let's go over that. So let me cd back to one directory. And then in here, I am going to see. So let me just go inside this guy. Okay, so this env file. So there are a few settings that are involved in the env file. Let me show those to you. Okay, I just opened this file in Notepad. So see the install Chromium, by default, it is false. So if you would like to have Chromium installed as a part of this installation, this is one of the important variables that you can set up to just true, and it will do it for you. And then other things, these are the versions that we were talking about in the environment files. So again, 8.1 is the latest one. And by default, if you see, these environment variables are set to point to those. But if you want to change to a different version, you can do those over here. JDK base image, same thing. And then Tomcat base image also, same thing. These are the configurations. These are the ones that I would like to use. So I'm going to leave these as is. But if you would like to change any, this is where you would come in and change. Other setting below is the scalable query engine. So if you would like the scalable query engine to be enabled, again, it's a Boolean, just go ahead and change this to true. And once your installation is done, the scalable query engine would also be enabled as a part of that. So for this demo, I'm going to leave it all as default, and I am not going to be going in and changing anything. But just know that if you would like to, this is the file where you would change the settings. And then let's go under resources. And inside resources, there is the default properties. And here there is another important configuration file. And we will be making a couple of changes here. So let me show that to you. So let me open this file with Notepad one more time. And in here, you would see there is the settings for the Postgre. So the install that we are doing, we will have a separate container running the PostgreSQL, and then the actual Tomcat, the web application, will be running in the second container. And so both are containerized. They'll be talking to each other internally through Kubernetes. So all these Tomcat is okay, and this setting is okay. So one thing you want to see is for the DB host, this should be the available setting if you are going the Kubernetes route. So this should be the value. And the only thing I will change here is the namespace. So namespace is basically how Kubernetes internally divides the different clusters and pods. So we could leave it default, but we just have to make sure whatever namespace we put here, the same namespace have to propagate through all the way for the PostgreSQL and also for the actual web application. If not, they will be in different namespaces, and the two namespaces cannot talk to each other by default. So for this demo, I am going to change it to call it GRS. Again, just a namespace. I could put my name in here, anything. I'll just have to make sure that everything goes in the same namespace for them to be able to work together. And that is pretty much it. Everything else, DB is already looking good. So I am going to close this file. Okay. And then let's go ahead and copy a couple of files. So at this point, what I'm going to do is we need the license file, and we also need the key store files. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to copy over the license and the key store files from a location where I already saved them. So again, this is my license and my key store files that I already have. So let's do that. All right. Okay, so again, it's a simple copy. I'm copying from my license location, this license file, over to resources /license. Okay, and that is done. Same thing I'm going to do for the key store as well. All right, that is done. All right, just want to make sure I'm in the JRS directory, and that is pretty much it. So all these settings we did so far enable us to be able to create the image that will be deploying to the Kubernetes cluster. So just want to make sure you are in the Docker JRS folder. And then the next command is the Docker compose.
Just a quick question here, Gaurav, about the customizations. So let's say I have some customization in my server. Should I put it in this stage or after I build the command?
Yeah, so really good question, Badr. So any customizations, so right now when we build the cache, build the actual image for this file, anything that's in the bin zip will be picked up now and would be bundled into the image. So any customizations that you have right now would be a good time to have them all baked into the bin zip. And there are two ways of doing that. One is you can actually go inside this folder, the Jasper server customizations, and you can land any and all of your customizations here. And then when I do this command, the build, it's going to pick these up and override them over the existing defaults. So that is one way. And the other way is, if you notice, the binzip file has been exploded here, right? In this folder. So this would be your folder where you go in and you can directly apply any and all customizations. And then this would be the folder that gets picked up and gets bundled into the image. So two ways of doing it, but before we build the image, this would be the point of doing those customizations.
Okay, I'm sorry. So if I get this right, so in the first time installation, if I have customization, I can put them in the Jasper in the customization folder inside the container. And later, after the installation, if I'm going to add new customization, I can also put them here inside the bin folder directly.
That is correct. That is correct.
And you would have to rebuild then the image.
Yes.
If you want to add.
Yes.
Right.
Like we do in Docker before. Yeah.
In Docker, yes. So whatever is present right now, once I run this command, it is going to pick up whatever is available. So any customization that are available will be picked up right now. Yeah. But if I build the image, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just a quick note for the audience that that customization folder that you showed before, it represents the Tomcat root folder, not the Jasper server folder. So if you want to customize Tomcat, you can go there and create the same structure as Tomcat has and put your new files down to Jasper server own files. So the customization folder is the actual root folder of Tomcat. Yeah, and users can just respect the structure of the folders to add their files, update their files, and so on.
Yep. And Gaurav, one more comment on this. It's a minor difference between these two approaches that you mentioned. They're logically equivalent, but in terms of the build itself, if you because we use something called a multi-stage build. in Docker, when you put the changes in the customization folder, they will be added in the second stage of the build, basically. So there's a slight difference in terms of, when you rebuild the image, the speed at which it gets rebuilt. But I guess it's a minor detail, but I just wanted to mention that.
Correct. No, thank you for adding that. Come on. All right, let's go ahead and do the build. If you notice, I added the no cache argument. And this is just to make sure that if I have any previous caches lying around on my system, it doesn't just go in and pick up those. I wanted to force it to actually pick up this folder and rebuild the image from scratch. So it's going to take a few minutes because it's doing that. But we know for sure that it's not picking up any cache, and it's actually picking up everything that we see in the folder here.
Okay, so now it's actually installing all of our dependencies from the Docker file.
Mm-hmm.
So we're creating the image, and this this normally would take like 2 or 3 minutes, something like that, correct? Right?
That is correct. Yep, 2 or 3 minutes. All right. So looks like the image build just finished. Let's make sure that our images are available. So we see the web app image, and we also see the build-o-matic image. And one thing you notice is 8.1 is the tag, and that gives us a confirmation that, okay, we are on the right track here. All right. So far, we did all the settings that were needed. We were able to successfully bring in the binzip file, copy it over, do the entire build on Docker, and the image is ready. So now the next steps are we need to stand up the container for Postgres, and then we'll be deploying this image, and we will have our application up and running. All right, so the very first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go inside the Kubernetes directory now. So right now, I am in the Docker directory. So okay, cd k-s. All right. Okay, so now the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to add some repositories via Helm. So Helm is the package manager that we use for Kubernetes. And let me run the add repositories. Okay, so it looks like I already had these on my system, so it did not do that. But if on your machine you don't have these repositories, it's going to add these 4 repositories on your end in your system. All right, so since we have those,
so
now
just a quick question again.
Yes.
Sorry, Gaurav. So this is not mandatory. This is optional if I want to add those SHA proxy take and Elasticsearch and all of that.
So those are required. So there are different settings that we have for Kubernetes, and those settings rely on these packages. So no, this is not an optional step. You do want to have all these repositories added.
But it's not like users have to use those Elastic and proxy. They can use whatever proxy they want. They can use yeah.
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah, that's the flexibility with all the containers that if you want to use something else, you can. The only thing is these settings by default, the image and all, they're all pointing to Elastic and Prometheus. So you will have to just go in and point to whatever different components you want to use instead of these. And yeah, they would still work.
All right, thank you.
Cool. All right. So in the next step, I'm just going to do update on the dependencies. Just before I do that, just want to make sure you are in the Jaspersoft containers and the K8s directory. So that's very important. And then let's go ahead with this command. All right. So if you notice, it deletes the outdated charts, which are packages in the Helm terminology, and it got the latest ones that were needed. So that is perfect. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to again copy in my license and the keys. So let me do the license first. And again, I'm just doing a straight copy. I'm going from my C drive. This is the folder I have where I have my license sitting there. And I also have my keys sitting in this folder. And again, this is Windows. And then I am copying them over to JRS, Helm, Secrets, and License folder. So in the file system, let me show you where it is. So Kubernetes folder, JRS, Helm, Secrets, and then the license folder. So this is where I want to bring in my license. Okay, as you see, this got copied over here. And then same thing with the key store. I'm going to just go in and bring in my keys. And for the keys, I'm going into a different folder. It's the key store folder. And my 2 keys have been copied. All right. So one additional step I want to do on the key store is I want to change the permissions to 644 just for the key store. So if you notice, I'm doing a chmod, recursive, and 644. And I'm doing that for everything in this key store folder. So all these items is what I'm running this command on. And okay. And we are good. So, and that is pretty much it for the settings. So the next command, I'm going to install the PostgreSQL repository, and I'm going to put that in the JRS namespace. And here's the command that I'm going to be using for this. So it's helm install repository, and it's a bitnami PostgreSQL. Setting up the password as this one. And then I want to create a new namespace called JRS, and I'm going to install this within that namespace.
So, Gaurav, these commands, do we also have them in the wiki in our GitHub repository?
We do, yes. So
Okay.
all these commands are taken from this document, actually, this document itself. So let me actually locate this command for you. Okay, so this is the one.
Step 16. Yeah.
So it's the step 16, correct.
Thank you.
All right, so looks like this command ran successfully. As you can see, there is a read-write connection open, and our repository link looks good, and it says it can be accessed on port 5432. That is perfect. Sometimes ports, you can run into issues, and so especially issues with the ports, you want to look to see if the port is already in use. And if the port is already bind, of course, it's not going to let you reuse the same port. So for my demo, I made sure that this port is not being used. I ran into an issue earlier when I was doing some other demo, and I just wanted to highlight that. So make sure this port is open and available. If you have any other service running, anything else running on this port, and it's already using that port, you will run into port errors at this point. All right, so next, we're gonna go into the values.yaml file, and we're gonna change the samples. Let me show you where it is and what values you can change. So it would be under the JRS Helm folder. And here you want to look into values.yaml file. So let's open up this file. Let me open this with Notepad here. Okay, perfect. And then in here, you want to look for these samples. So by default, the samples are enabled, and that's our 2 sample databases and all the resources that come bundled with that JasperReports Server. And if you're doing especially a non-dev environment, so it's anything like a pre-prod and prod, you may not need those samples. So here is the setting where you can go and include the samples is set to true. So just go ahead and change this to false. And you want to make sure Build-O-Matic is enabled. So this should be true, and this setting should be false. And again, this is the values.yaml file. And I just did a find for the samples. I found that it was true. I went in and changed it to false. I save this file and I close out of it. All right. And I am still in the main Kubernetes directory, so that is good. And once this setting is done, then I can go ahead and actually do the install of the application. All right, so Helm install JRS. I'm doing it in the same namespace, JRS namespace. That's very important. And if you notice, I have a timeout of 25 minutes. You could go less than that. It generally doesn't take that long. But sometimes what I've noticed is this is a very intensive step. It brings in all the different resources, brings in the packages. So doing that, depending on how fast your machine is, how many resources available, it sometimes times out on me. And so that's the reason I put the time out as 25 minutes, just to make sure that while doing its all bundling and installation, it doesn't fail just because it timed out. So, but I assure you, it's not going to take that long, and probably going to take around 10, 12 minutes maximum. All right, let me run this command. All right, guys, looks like the installation just completed. So as you can see in the end, there is thanks for installing JasperReports Server. And then it tells you to run a command to get to the URL. And the reason it does that is there's load balancing in play, and every machine is different. You could have Kubernetes running on AWS or Azure on your local Linux. So the URL may be different based on how you have the load balancer and everything set up. So that's the reason instead of giving you a hard-coded value, it asks you to run a command, get the host name, and then be able to render the actual name. So yeah, we're just gonna do exactly the same thing. I am gonna run this command that it asked me to.
Question here, Gaurav, please, before. So here, when you run the JRS Helm, so you actually installed Kubernetes and you installed the Docker inside Kubernetes, and you set up the JasperReports Server with Docker and Kubernetes together in one system. So how Kubernetes actually know which Docker image is going to embed, is going to run? That link that I still couldn't see clearly between Kubernetes and the Docker images.
Yeah, that's a great question, Badr. So yeah, all those settings, these are the two files where you have all the important settings. So the image tag, which image to pick up, which image to bundle in the deployment, are specifically in the values.yaml file. Let me open it and I can show it to you. So if you go through this file, you will notice that for the Build-O-Matic and JRS, you would see this is the one. So enable true, and here is your image tag, the 8.1.0 that we built in Docker. So if you had a different tag image over there, so let's say that was like 8.0. So all you will need to do is change this value to 8.0.0. And then the deployer, the Kubernetes scripts will automatically know which tag to pick up. And then when they do the deployment, they'll pick up the other version instead of the 8.1.0. Okay. So similarly, a lot of other settings. Again, if you are using 8.1.0, you wouldn't have to change any of these, but totally configurable. Any and everything can be changed here to match to what image name you have, or what settings you want to change based on your setup on your local, or maybe AWS, Azure, or GCP, and whatnot.
And in case if we have a cluster, we have multiple images, you can also change that in the YAML files.
So if we have a yeah. So multiple images, you can still change them in here. So for every deployment, it's going to look at this values YAML configuration. And for this deployment that I did, it had a value of 8.1.0. So it knew from the 8.1.0 configuration as to this is the image tag that I need to pick up for this deployment. So
okay,
change, yeah, any changes, you would change the name to match up with the image tag in this file.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so let's run the command to get our URL. And this is the first command, and the second one is I'm just gonna echo. And here is the URL, guys. So this is the URL that I need to go to be able to open up. Okay, so let me go here, open up a new tag, and I'm gonna paste it here. And there we go. This is your Kubernetes, and having the application deployed over there. Let me just use the default super user.
So as I can see here, Gaurav, we don't use the port. So that means that Kubernetes is spin up in Greece load balancer by default.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, so it is pointing to our image.
That
or
is
running so running container. Okay.
Yep. So this is all. Everything looks to be good. And if I click on about, it's going to say 8.1. And if you remember, that's the version I started with in the very beginning. So that's the one I downloaded from edelivery.tipco.com and copied it over when we build our Docker image. And this got flowed all the way to the Kubernetes deployment.
Sounds really good.
Awesome. Yeah.
It looks good. Yes.
Yep. All right, Badr. If there are no more questions, that is it for the demo.
So is that all? Yeah. Thank you so much, Gaurav. That was really rich demo. With the we've seen all the steps clearly. So thanks for that. Let me just share back my screen pretty quick. Okay. So yeah. So as we've seen with Gaurav, our demo, is this something that you also wanted to specify in this slide, Gaurav?
Regarding what, Badr?
Is this any on those bullet points? Is something that you might you want to specify to our audience as well?
No. So this link is the most important link. This is a good starting point for you guys. This is the github.com under TIPCO software, the JS Docker. So this is the main document, like I showed earlier. So it has entry points to Kubernetes and Docker. So regardless whether you're doing a Docker container deployment or you're doing strictly Kubernetes, it has entry points to documentation for both and resources for both. So yeah, I would advise the users to bookmark this link, and this is going to be the main link you guys need for any container deployments going forward.
Exactly, and as I've specified before, we already did 2 sessions of Dr. Jaspersoft. First of all, you're gonna find it here, where we're talked about in an overview of how Kubernetes and Docker works together with JasperReports Server, our offering. And we also did here the first part of this very Dr. Jaspersoft session, when we focused more on the Docker part. As you've seen, Gaurav demoed you step by step and focused more on the Kubernetes side. And in this Docker here, it's more for Docker. Yeah, so those are the resources that you guys might bookmark for everything related to Jaspersoft. So we have our community website. We have about the Dr. Jaspersoft landing page, where we going to put the link of this recording in this page along with the slides. So feel free to visit this website later on to refresh your memory of our sessions. And yeah, we have also the YouTube playlist in the Jaspersoft Embedded VI channel, where we post many other content and tutorials about JasperReports Server and Jaspersoft Studio as well. Don't forget to, if you want to have any questions about Dr. Jaspersoft, please post it in our community answers website. Just add the tag Dr. Jaspersoft, Dr. Jasper, so we can be aware that is related to one of our sessions. And yeah, those GitHub repo and the previous webinars are actually linked here, as Gaurav stated before. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Gaurav, again for this amazing session, and thank you guys for joining us. And again, this is our email. You can drop us anytime, anywhere, email about our Dr. Jaspersoft sessions. Any questions, any remarks, any feedbacks is all welcome. that would be all for today, and see you next time, guys. Ciao, ciao.
See you guys.